Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is quite straightforward. You're given a circle there, and you need to fill in here the radius and the diameter. So we need to fill in both of these bits here. So you've got to have a look at your circle and what have they already given us? Well, this line here goes from the centre to the edge, so we know that's just going to be the radius from the centre to the edge is just the radius. So I'm going to fill that in there. The radius is 5 millimeters. Make sure to put the units in. But we need to work out the diameter. Well, if we remember, the diameter is all the way across, and so it's going to be double what the radius is. So the diameter is going to be what the radius is, but doubled, or times by 2. So we know the diameter is 5 times 2, which is 10, so we can fill that bottom line in as well, 10 millimeters. And that's all you need to do for now. Okay, so another very similar question, but what's the difference? Let's have a look. This time on our circle, we've got 12 centimeters goes from one side of the circle all the way to the other side. So that's our diameter. So I'm going to fill in 12 centimeters is my diameter. Well, how am I going to work out the radius? Well, radius just goes from the center to the edge. So that's going to be half of that. So the radius is going to be whatever the diameter was, but half it, or divide by 2, which gives us 6. So I've got the radius is 6, the diameter is 12. Okay, so we're now going to move on to being able to answer some questions. So every time we answer a question, we're going to do 3 things. We're going to write down the formula, write down the values of the R and D, so the radius and diameter, and we're going to then plug in the values, and that's all you need to do for a question. So let's have a look. Calculate the area of the following circle. So the first step I need to do is write down the formula. Well, we've just seen the area, A, is pi, that number 3.14, times the radius squared. Lovely. So I've written down the formula, I've done step 1. Now I'm going to write down the radius or the diameter. Well, which one am I given in this question? So using what we did in the last exercise, the radius is what they've given us this time from the centre to the edge, and that's 5 centimetres. And diameter, remember, is double the radius, so I've written down radius and diameter. I've done step 2. Lovely. Last thing I need to do is plug the values into the formula. So which bits do I know? Well, I want to work out the area. Still don't know that bit. Pi, we're going to keep there. But I now do know the radius, don't I? The radius is 5 centimeters, so pi times 5, not forgetting the little squared there. Okay, now we can start doing a bit of calculating. Pi times 5 squared, well, keep the pi there. 5 squared is 5 times 5, so that's 25. And now for every question, we're going to use pi to be that value, 3.14. And at this point, we can now get our calculator, type in 3.14 times by 25, and that gives us an answer of 78.5. But careful, this is the area of something, so we need to not forget the units. Area, remember, is going to be in centimeters squared. So for every question, we're going to write it out looking like this. So you're going to have a bit of workings for each question. And what we did earlier is helping us with this. Okay, so next example, again, we're going to follow those 3 steps. Okay, so the first step we're going to do is write down the formula. Still area of a circle, so area equals pi times the radius squared. Good. Now I'm going to write down the R value, so the radius, and I'm going to write down the diameter. Well, what have I got in the question? It goes from one side to the other, so that's the diameter, so 12 meters is our diameter. How do I find the radius from that? Well, the radius is just from the centre to the edge, so it's going to be half of that. So the radius is 6 meters. Now I'm going to plug in the bits I know. Well, we want to find the area. Pi is just a number we'll plug in a minute. And we know the radius is 6, so 6, and it's got to be squared. That's what the formula tells us. Let's keep going now. So area equals pi times 6 squared. Well, 6 squared is 6 times 6, so that's 36. Oh, there we go. And then at this stage here, we're going to change the pi to that 3.14 that we're going to use for the whole lesson. And we've got something there to plug into our calculator. So you can use a calculator or you can just use the calculator on your phone. So 3.14 times by 36, and that gives us 113.04. Let's not forget the units, that's going to be meters squared. There we go. Okay, so this one's slightly harder. Okay, so this time we're going to still do the same steps. So we've got area equals pi r squared, pi times radius squared. But this time we're given the area and we need to go backwards and find the radius. So let's put in the values that we already know. I know that area is 50.24, so I'm going to put that here in that formula. So I know 50.24, it's got to be what pi times the radius squared was. Okay, well I actually know that pi is 3.14. Okay, so we know that 50.24 has got to be equal to the pi part times radius squared. Well, how can I find this radius squared? Remember back to that algebra we did. If I want to get radius on its own, at the minute it's being times by 3.14. So to get rid of that 3.14 and leave radius on its own, I'm going to divide by 3.14 on both sides. Let's see what that gives us. So on this left-hand side, 50.24 divide by 3.14, and that gives me 16. And on the right-hand side, we divided by 3.14, and that got rid of it. It just made it 1. So we've got now the radius squared equals 16. So let's think about it. What number squared gives me 16? Well, if r squared is 16, then r must be 4, because 4 times 4 gives me 16. So that's my answer to the question. So just looking at what we did, we wrote down the formula, we plugged in the bits we knew, so we knew the area, and then we had to divide by pi on both sides to leave us with what the radius was. Have a go at this on the next question. Okay, so these are quite tricky, so well done for giving it a go. Let's have a look at the answer. So area equals pi times radius squared. We will have written this a lot of times this lesson, so hopefully we will have remembered it. Now we plug in the bits we know. Well, we're told the area in the question. So I'm going to write that where it says A for area, I'm writing what number it told us. It told us it was 452.16. The rest of it we're not sure about. We're trying to find out what the radius is, but we know that pi is that symbol for 3.14. So I'm going to write the same thing again on the line below, but instead of pi, I'm going to write what number we know it is. Okay, we're aiming to find what the radius is, so we want that radius on its own. So I need to get rid of this bit here. Well, it's timesing by 3.14, so to get rid of that, we need to do the opposite. We need to divide by 3.14. And if I do that on one side, I've got to do it on the other side. So I'm going to write those workings there. Using your calculator again, I'm going to put 452.16 divide by 3.14, and I get 144. And that's going to equal the radius squared. Okay, last step, we need to find the radius from radius squared. Well, I need to think of a number squared that gives me 144. Well, I know 12 squared gives me 144. So that's my radius. If you weren't sure what number squared gave you 144, we can always use the square root button. So if you put the square root of 144 into your calculator, that would have given you a value of 12. Okay, again, this question looks very similar, but make sure you don't make a mistake. It actually wants us to find the diameter. which means we'll just have to do one extra step compared to the other questions we've done. So again, let's write out the formula. Area equals pi times by the radius squared. Which bits of information am I given in the question? I'm given the area, okay? So instead of this A here, I'm going to write 12.56 and everything else stays the same. There we go. We know pi in this lesson, we're just going to stick to it being 3.14. We know it goes on forever and ever, but just to make it a little bit simpler for us, we're going to put 3.14, and that's got to be times by r squared to give us that 12.56. So again, as always, we want that r squared on its own, and at the minute it's being times by 3.14. So to get rid of that, we need to do the opposite of timesing, which is dividing. Divide by 3.14 and make sure we do it on both sides, because what we do to one side we have to do to the other. In your calculator, I'm typing 12.56 divided by 3.14, and that gives me 4. That's a nice number there. And that gives me r squared. Well, what number squared gives me 4? That means the radius must be 2. But let's have a look back at the question. It wants me to find the diameter. Well, remember, radius is from the centre to the edge, so I know that's 2 meters if we want to keep the units. Let's remember, though, the diameter, which is what they want, is from one side all the way to the other, so it's going to be double the radius. So the last thing you need to do is just double it, or times by 2. You can all do that in your head. We know, therefore, the diameter is 4 meters. Really well done if you've got that one correct. Okay, so here we've got to work out the area of the whole logo. We're given already that the rectangle is 72. So I need to find the area of this bit here and the area of this bit here and add them on. Well, if we notice, this is a semicircle here, this is a semicircle here. So actually those two will form one circle when we put them together like this. So let's just say this one was called semicircle A, and this one semicircle B. When we put them together, it's just one circle. So all we need to do really is find the area of that circle and add it on. Okay, well, to find the area of a circle, we need the radius. Well, how am I going to work that out? I think we're going to have to use this bit here about the area of the rectangle. Let's just go on a side note over here. We've got the rectangle. We know it's 72 centimeters squared, and we know the base is 9 centimeters. Well, remembering back to the last few lessons, we know the area of a rectangle equals base times height. We know that the base is 9, and we don't know the height yet, but we do know the area. So we know that 9 times by the height, base times height, has got to be the area, which was 72. So what number h here makes 9 times something equals 72? Well, that's 9 times 8. So I'm going to fill in on that diagram there that the height, this bit here that I'm drawing, is 8 centimeters on both sides. Okay. That's now helped us, hasn't it? Because if we have a look at that, that's going along our semicircle. So we know that this length here, from one side of the semicircle to the other, is 8. Well, one side to the other is diameter. So I know the diameter is 8 centimeters. I still need to find the radius for this formula. Well, we know to half the radius, the diameter, sorry, to get the radius. So we've had to do that extra step in order to then work out that circle. We can now do exactly what we've been doing previously. Area equals pi times radius squared. Radius we found was 4. 4 squared is 4 times 4, which is 16. Pi we now write in as 3.14, times that by 16, and let's put that in our calculator. 3.14 times by 16 gives me 50.24. Brilliant. I've found the area of those two semicircles, 50.24. They told us at the start of the question that the rectangle was 72. We need to find the area of the whole logo. So all I need to do is the 72, which was the rectangle, add the circles or the two half circles, add those together to get our answer. So 122.24, and remember it's area, so centimetres squared. Really well done if you got that. That's quite tricky. Okay, last question, putting everything together we've learnt today. So I've highlighted in red those important parts. She wants to buy a carpet, which is that size of the blue circle there. She needs it to be 4 meters from one side to the other. So if I draw my diagram from one side to the other, 4 meters. What have I drawn there? That's the diameter. So again, diameter is 4 meters. So I know the radius is half of the diameter. I've already written out those two bits of information there. The local shop sells carpet in rolls of 1 meter square for £4.50. How many rolls will Annie need and how much will it cost? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is find the area of the circle or of the carpet. I'm then going to find out how many rolls she needs. And then finally, once I know how many rolls she needs, I can find out the cost. So we've got 3 steps for this problem. You can pause it if you want and have a go at that now, or you can just carry on watching the solution. Okay, so first step, area. Area of a circle, pi times radius squared, and we can plug in that we found that the radius was 2. Pi times 2 squared is pi times 4, and we're using 3.14 for pi. So actually we can find that 3.14 times by 4 gives me 12.56. 12.56, and that's going to be meters squared. Let's have a think how many rolls we need. Well, if I need 12.56 meters squared of carpet, I can't get 0.56 of a meter because they sell them in rolls of 1 meter. So I'm actually going to have to round it up. I need 13 meters squared, so I need 13 rolls. So that's that first part of the question done. 13 rolls. Well, next bit's quite straightforward. If I've got 13 rolls and they're £4.50 each, the last thing I need to do is 13 times the cost of each roll, £4.50, and I can type that into my calculator. 13 times £4.50, and it's going to cost Annie £58.50 in total. So that's my answer. There we go, tick it if you got it right, well done.